Ready graphics? Ready theme?
Good evening. For your information tonight.
Hi, I'm Jesse Mullins.
And I'm Lauren Milberger.
And this is FYI,
the Murphy Brown Podcast.
I would say that he is in a tizzy.
Do we think Corky is a good shopper?
Yes.
For presents?
Yes. Oh, wait. Like a cat burglar who smells like Chanel.
And on today's episode,
we'll be talking about Season 3, Episode 11, Jingle Hell, Jingle All the Way.
I love this title so much.
Can I tell you something about this title, Jesse?
Please do.
It was printed wrong in my local paper. So for years, I thought it was called Jingle Hell, Hingle Hell.
That's what I'm calling it now.
like when you make fun of the song Batman said Robin laid an egg. Like I thought it was like part of that.
Absolutely. The H was just taking over. That's all.
Because just to remind people, we used to not get the titles for sitcoms. And so I had to look at the little tiny lettering in the grid of my local Star Ledger.
I am only calling it that from now on. I'm obsessed.
Thank you. Which we should maybe call it the name because it won an Emmy, but we won't because we like our new title. We have spoken about this episode a lot on the podcast in 3 separate interviews. So we definitely recommend that you go back and listen to our interview with Steve Peterman and Gary Donzig, but also Barnett Kellman told the full story of this episode because it is based on a true story.
Which, when you watch it, of course it is. Like, the actual anxiety and frustration of these characters is so true to life, especially as adults now who have worked in offices. Like, yes, this is real.
Yeah, and I was telling Jesse that when I was a kid, this was not necessarily one of my favorite episodes. And I remember, sorry, Steve and Gary, I was a kid being perplexed why it won the Emmy because, wait. Steve and Gary are stomping off and turning off the podcast. Wait.
Like, no, come back.
And I realized, because now I think it's hilarious, it's because I was too young. I had never worked in an office. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand the dynamic of it. It just was, I wasn't mature enough for this kind of situational comedy.
Yeah, I think like normally when you have a Christmas episode or, as Miles would like to say, a holiday episode, I think it's normally a more like generally family understood kind of theme, So this idea of one that is very just, it is geared toward the adults of the world who are like what the season feels like it's about versus what it should actually be about, like that whole conversation. But it is a very like working adult centric topic.
Yeah. Office politics, even though they're all friends, it just, it's sort of that hierarchy.
Oh yeah.
And so the real life story is that the cast decided that they were going to only donate to charity, and Candace
couldn't stop.
She felt like she had to give something to the crew, and she was hiding boxes and bags of presents in her trailer, and everybody found out. And again, listen to Barnett telling the story because he can tell it better than we can.
It's so delightful. It was really funny because as I was watching this episode, for a second, I forgot that we had been told this story. Mm-hmm. And so as I was watching, I was like, gosh, that's so familiar. And I went, oh, wait, you're an idiot. You literally have been told this story before. Because it's just, sometimes I feel like you see episodes where it's kind of, like the writer-producer inserts and it doesn't feel that realistic. This just feels so real. It feels so
real and perfect for Murphy, right? Like it's like, that sounds like something Murphy would do. And I think on the other note, which is a testament to Candace as well, not that I'm saying everyone else is not like this, but the idea that even though Murphy is a selfish person, right, is a very sort of, me person, I generally believe that Murphy didn't buy the gifts so that they would like her. I think she generally, these people have supported me. Mm-hmm. They don't have as much money as I do. Again, I think this is also, Candace being the child of celebrity her whole life, right?
Yep.
Understanding that sort of separation and dynamic is you want to
being one of the haves.
Yeah. And wanting to be supportive because you can.
I think it would make sense for someone like Murphy, who has sometimes trouble connecting with other people and expressing how she feels about people, to show that by gifting.
Oh, that's
that
such a
it's
great
not
point.
about like, I want you to think of me this way. It's like, I want to show you that I do see and like sweet Marv. She's like, Marv, I see you. I respect you. I saw this. I wanted you to have something so you know that I care. Yeah. I think that she is somebody who, because she struggles with expression sometimes and she has the means, she can show it this way.
Oh, that's such a good point. What really struck me was I felt it would have been easy for them to go, Murphy is only doing this so that no one spits in her coffee, or Murphy is only doing this because she wants to be liked. It's not just a farcical episode of a sitcom. It actually is very telling about Murphy as a character.
You know, it comes back at the end with what Eldon does for her and for other people. I think it is a core value and motivator for her, why she's the journalist she is. People forget that selfish isn't necessarily a 4-letter word. You know, like we are all selfish. It is okay to be selfish sometimes.
Absolutely.
I think the key to Murphy is not selfish at the expense of others. You know, she can be self-centered, self-absorbed. She can be selfish when it's necessary, but her core personality, her core person cares about others and wants to make sure that there is more equity in the world. And so I think it actually makes complete sense from the established character that she's the one who's like, could we maybe not? And then can't help herself because she also doesn't remember that gift giving can be more than just capitalism.
Yeah. Plus, when you have a lot, you know, what do you get a person who can buy themselves pretty much anything? Again, it's the thought that counts. It's about thinking about someone. And I think going back to Murphy's birthday episode, that is why Frank and Murphy try to get each other experiences, something different, something that isn't just, well, I mean, he got her these beautiful earrings, but we'll talk about that later. But just to give people a sense, this episode was nominated against 2 episodes of Seinfeld, another episode of Murphy Brown, and The Days and Nights of Molly Dodd, which we have spoken about as sort of been a precursor to Murphy Brown, even though it was more of a dramedy in sense of some of the topics. This episode is directed by Barnett Kellman, and it aired December 17th, 1990.
I'm always curious about when in December people drop their holiday episodes.
Yeah, right?
You know, how close to the actual holidays themselves. I feel like December 17th is a perfect time.
It really is.
Because everyone's in the spirit, but you're also not getting distracted. Like, people will actually tune in because we're not quite in the everyone's off to family yet. Like, I feel like that's a perfect time for viewership.
Yeah, no, I think so. And we actually have, thanks to Entertainment Weekly, what was airing against this episode. And because it's a lot of holiday stuff, I felt like we should mention it.
It's fascinating.
So obviously we have Monday Night Football. We know that. That's always been something that Murphy has been up against. It's been considered counter programming. That's on ABC. On NBC from 8 to 9 was Mickey's Christmas Carol, which is a 1984 cartoon.
Classic.
From 9 to 11 on NBC was a made-for-TV movie, A Mom for Christmas, with Olivia Newton-John.
I read that when I saw this, and I had such a sense memory of seeing ads for this. Yes.
Do you want to describe or read what it's about for people? Because that's the kicker.
Please, can I? Like, what a time capsule. This aired on NBC from 9 to 11 p.m. That's some late viewership. Olivia Newton-John stars in this new made-for-TV fairy tale about a department store mannequin that comes to life to help a motherless little girl. I mean, come on. Classic.
So we're assuming that Olivia Newton-John is the mannequin, right? I realized I didn't even look it up.
Yes. I should look at her. In 1990, look at Olivia Newton-John. She is a mannequin come to life.
And then the Murphy Brown description, I think, is great. It's under the spell of rampant holiday consumerism, the FYI gang goes on a frantic spending spree.
I mean, correct.
And then the TV Guide version says the gang decides to donate to charity instead of giving Christmas gifts. But the holiday spirit goes up the chimney when Murphy breaks the pact and buys presents. That's a great little tag there.
Yeah. Yeah, it establishes without giving away too many. I feel like you read that and you immediately start imagining the things that are going to happen. Hijinks ensue. Legendary status.
Yeah, and her history as being a real important part of the legacy of SNL and how it shaped her career. And we do talk about that on our Patreon. Plus the money goes to producing and editing this podcast.
Hey. Okay, so we open on I think a familiar sight for many of us from the 80s and 90s, which is the turnover of the holiday display at a department store. This happens to be Morgan and Pierce. What I just want to, this is a brief moment for a soapbox of mine, which is I have a personal pet peeve about people who turn over to the cliche Christmas decor way too early. I like that this is demonstrating that
I was hoping that we would talk about this.
Oh, I hate it so much, especially as a spooky girl. You do not encroach upon October. You back off. But also, I love an autumnal celebration. I am not saying that I believe that everyone should be practicing Thanksgiving recognition. I think there's a lot of problematic elements to that. However, we have an entire month that could still be autumnal. Let's let it happen.
Agreed.
So I appreciate that this holiday display is clearly having celebrated the late November holiday and now is switching over. In my household.
Yes.
Now, I was raised Christian. I am not a practicing Christian, nor I do not ascribe to the Christian faith. However, I do enjoy a secular Yuletide celebration.
I love that.
And because of how I was raised, there are some traditions that we got to keep going. So what happens in my household, we have spooky season, and then we transition into some other fall seasons. On Thanksgiving, we wake up, we watch Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. We watch Home for the Holidays, which is a Thanksgiving movie. We watch Addams Family Values because of the Thanksgiving pageant. We watch Shibboleth and...
Wow.
Oh my gosh, what's the name of the other? Oh, Two Indians in the Lobby.
Yes.
Yes.
This is all West Wing.
A now unfortunate title.
Yeah.
But from my favorite Thanksgiving episodes from The West Wing, we do all of that. We have our meal that is lately just my husband and I, because he works a famous production of The Christmas Carol here in Chicago every year. And then that evening, after we have celebrated the autumnal holiday, then we pack up the autumnal decorations. We put on Muppet Christmas Carol and we put up our little Yuletide tree. And that's when you're allowed, in my home, to put the fake snow everywhere. We only have so much fall, y'all. Like when Christmas, New Year's, when those times end, there are months left of the winter time. Why are we rushing into the winter time? Also, I can only listen to certain songs so many times. How do you feel as someone this is not their holiday that is encroaching upon everywhere they walk?
Yeah, it's a problem. No, it's interesting. My mother always taught me that and I know it's not as rampant anymore, but that whole thing of like, people saying happy holidays, at checkout.
Heaven forbid.
But I yeah, listen, you can say whatever you want. It's fine. Yeah. I don't care. But I think something interesting that people may not realize is that my mother taught me to say, if someone at a checkout wished me a Merry Christmas, for me to just say, same to you.
Smart. Yeah.
But it is a very different experience as someone who doesn't celebrate that particular holiday. And I know that people will say that it's secular. People who were not brought up either, and I can only speak as a Jew, but I assume for a Muslim, Buddhist, and I have a friend who, one of my great best friends is Muslim. She would say the same thing. But again, not speaking for her, is that it's just it's not secular for us. So we just don't sort of celebrate it. So on one hand, it's actually a very relaxing time for me because I know that everybody else is going to sort of start to shut down, and I don't have that commitment. I can buy my presents super early or even after, because sometimes, my nephews celebrate both holidays. So like they're busy sometimes. I don't give them gifts until New Year's. So like I can take advantage of some after, the holiday sale. And what many people may not realize is that Hanukkah is a very small holiday. And speaking of commercialism, the only reason we give gifts is because of Christmas. Hanukkah is not a gift-giving holiday necessarily. I mean, now it is, but like if traditionally you gave gelt, which was money, not candy, a couple of coins or something. So it's not a big deal for me. I like the fact that I don't have to get on a plane with all of these people. I can stay home.
You get to watch everyone else stress out.
Yeah. So I think it's great. Not my holiday.
But you all have to, I'm like yelling at you. I think most of you probably agree with me. I'm so sorry. I'm not mad at you. But this idea of like the actual reason for this particular season is religious based. When you get to pick and choose when that is brought in, fine. It's great that you have that option. Other people don't have that option when it encroaches upon their schedule and their lives, and they have to recognize your celebration. So while this holiday display turnover is happening, it also, speaking of sitcoms from the 90s and our youth, it really sends me back to the Will and Grace episode when Jack gets a chance to decorate, I think, a Barney's window.
Oh, yes.
And it's just crisis. And that's all.
Yeah, and for people who may not realize, like the window decorations in New York City
Big
are a
deal.
huge thing.
Mhm.
Although some of you who may follow Diane on Instagram may notice, because she's a big fan of the windows, particularly.
They're beautiful.
Oh, they're gorgeous. And, there's red ropes and people come into the city and, alone or with their kids, and you like look at all the windows. We would do that when I was a kid.
Mhm.
They're a real sort of gorgeous display of creativity.
It is art.
Yeah, I
It
don't
is
know
truly
how that.
art.
Yeah, I don't know if they do that in DC necessarily, but like this is sort of a tradition in New York.
So as we're watching this changeover happen, we hear an incredible rendition of one of my favorite holiday songs, Silver Bells, sung by one Wilson Picket.
Yes, and what's interesting is that I'm sure we all recognize Wilson Picket, but I at first had no idea what this was from, and I had to again Shazam it.
Hey,
Heyo.
sponsor us.
So this is from a 1982 Christmas album called Christmas Soul Special. It is a Motown album, and I think eventually we have another song, I think, in the series from it. Silver Bells is written by Jay Livingston and Ray Evans. Became probably the most popular sung by Bing Crosby. But I want to use this time because we didn't when we have previously talked about Wilson Pickett's music, Midnight Hour, for example, to talk about Wilson Pickett himself. So Wilson Pickett, 1941 to 2006, is considered one of the leading music figures of the 60s, as well as a significant figure in the development of American soul music, having recorded over 50 songs that cross between the U.S. R&B charts and the U.S. Billboard Hot 100. Now, Midnight Hour, which we mentioned, is a song that Wilson co-wrote. He co-wrote a number of songs, which I'll get to in a moment. Some of his other more famous songs that we haven't talked about on the podcast is Mustang Sally, which will come up.
Hey.
6345789, Land of a Thousand Dances. In 1991, he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which was a year that was a bit of a revival of sorts for him, thanks to Jesse, what 1991 Irish film?
The Commitments.
The Commitments. Born Wilson Pickett Jr., he often referred to himself as Wicked Pickett.
Obsessed with that. I want to give myself a moniker like that.
Which, interesting enough, many feel, including I think himself, was associated to his passionate singing style, the energy that he put on stage, but also his offstage persona.
Oh.
He was born in Prattville, Alabama, the fourth of 11 children, and grew up singing in a Baptist choir. And according to his obit, he told reporters that he suffered a very abusive childhood at the hands of his mother, unfortunately. So when he was 14, he moved to Detroit to live with his father, who was a preacher. This was, of course, a move that would change the entire trajectory of his life. Because in Detroit, he sort of combined his background in Alabama of gospel singing, as well as sort of the street singing of Detroit. He was heavily influenced by Little Richard. And so from the mid-50s to the early 60s, Pickett sang in a few very popular gospel bands, including touring, which is very similar to the early roots of Aretha Franklin, whose father was also a preacher. And many of these tours were in the Deep South, where they had to sleep in their cars because they weren't allowed to stay in the hotels. They had to eat takeout because they couldn't eat in the restaurants. Now, he did sing lead on one song with one of these groups called the Falcons, in a 1962 hit, I Found a Love, which he also co-wrote. But it was really the only big song with the Falcons that he was the lead singer on, even though it was like one of their biggest hits. And so he was still struggling, and one of his girlfriends at the time said that she noticed that he couldn't even afford a coat in the wintertime when she met him. So he eventually left the Falcons, and what I think is so funny is that I don't know why they wouldn't let him sing lead on other songs, but because he was the only one who vocally could sing that hit of theirs, I'm sure one of many, the group broke up very shortly after he left. So talk about taking someone for granted. Again, I don't know all the details about that. So Wilson eventually sent a demo song of a song he co-wrote to Jerry Wexler at Atlantic, who then loved the song but wouldn't sign him and gave the song to Solomon Burke, who we've talked about on the show before. And he said it was one of the only times that he actually really, he cried.
Wow.
And the song, If You Need Me, has become a soul classic. But to his credit, Solomon Burke, when he found this out, because Pickett then also released that song on another record label, but it just wasn't as popular. And so Solomon Burke really pushed Atlantic to sign him because he was a big star at the time. So eventually Pickett succeeded at other smaller labels, including Double L Records, which Atlantic bought out his contract there in 1964. And then in 1965, he releases In the Midnight Hour, which is a song that he co-wrote, as mentioned, and then sold millions of copies, including getting a gold disc, and became kind of his signature song. And what's interesting is that that line, In the Midnight Hour, is sort of based on something he would throw into some of his gospel songs. They just obviously changed sort of the context of it. So as alluded before, Pickett's real-life personality was very volatile as much as his singing, which included drugs and alcohol, unfortunately. He liked guns and he had a temper. I think we can probably say that this may be based in, his horrible childhood.
Yeah.
He struggled with addiction. He had a stint in rehab for cocaine. And later in life, in the 1990s, he was convicted of drunk driving and vehicular manslaughter. He did die of a heart attack at the age of 64. Declining health due to probably a lot of his drug problems and alcohol problems. But also, I think what people may not know is that he didn't just write songs for himself. A lot of his songs were recorded by Led Zeppelin, Van Halen, the Rolling Stones, Aerosmith, the Grateful Dead, Genesis, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Hootie and the Blowfish, Bruce Springsteen, Los Lobos, The Jam, and Ani DeFranco, just to name a few.
Just a couple.
Yeah, obviously I can't talk about the entire life of Wilson Pickett. There's this great BBC radio documentary that I can link from YouTube that you can listen to with interviews and talks about his life. I want this to be a positive, talk about Wilson Pickett, but I also felt it was important to talk about that, he wasn't a perfect soul.
Yeah. I think a lot of art comes out of imperfect souls because that is the human experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't relate to perfection. And there's always that slippery slope of, only damaged people make good comedy or that kind of thing, which is not true. But I think that there is something to be said about, knowing the whole of the person helps you more deeply understand their art.
Yeah. And I don't want anyone to think that I would be sideswiping that and just ignoring it. Yeah. So throwing it back to the episode, in this opening, one of the actors who is taking apart the window and putting it back together is someone, a little Emmy winner who might be important to this episode?
I don't know. A friend to the pod, a friend to all, a Murphy Brown legend, one Stephen Peterman.
Yes, a former actor acting on the show more than once. We saw him previously at Corky's wedding as the florist.
I loved him as the florist.
And I don't know if someone backed out or they ran out of people, but it's kind of fun to have a Steve in an episode that won him an Emmy for writing.
In my headcanon, they realized they needed another person and just threw Steve into some wardrobe and sent him in there to get the shot. Yeah. But yes, I do love that he's in his own Emmy-winning episode. What's funny is when I was watching this, I saw it, I was like, is that Steve? And it was one of those, like, the person looked familiar and I didn't know if I was correct that it was Steve or if I just am recognizing some of the background actors.
There's a lot of shadow, in that scene. So yeah.
Good old Steve hanging out with us. We find ourselves in the bullpen, which is positively Christmased out.
Oh, well, Corky is always making that
everywhere.
Happen. Mm-hmm.
I also love that you just know this is Corky's doing without even being told it yet. But we do hear the dulcet tones of one Corky Sherwood Forrest, who from behind the elevator we hear is berating Mike. Mike is a senior reporter. He's been shot at in Afghanistan. He's done all these things, yet he couldn't help but buy a subpar wreath. Corky comes around the corner, pats the wreath into his chest because clearly it is not worthwhile. It does look very small with no furnishings. It is a subpar wreath. Luckily, Mike is saved because as Corky enters the bullpen, she sees the decor, lets out a huge gasp and goes, "It's Christmas!" And goes, "Oh, my little elves are doing such a good job."
So question. Yeah. We can assume that Corky is the person who pulls out the tree after Halloween, right?
100%. No, okay. I was thinking about this.
Okay.
Because especially for the time period, obviously, like...
Good point. For the time period.
For the time period, Thanksgiving was still a really big deal. I think, the idea of like Thanksgiving being less of an emphasized holiday is a more modern concept. Mm-hmm. I do believe because of the way I view Corky's upbringing in a, traditional household that would have all the decorations, I could see her getting very into turkeys and cornucopias and those things. But I do think that for her, the moment she is allowed to put out Christmas, she puts out Christmas. Corky now, I feel like Corky has a pink Valentine's Day Christmas tree. Like I feel like any chance for Corky to have Christmas, she will
decorate.
But I think at the time, I do think that she probably has a very strong rule.
That's a good point.
About each holiday. She has like holiday bins. I love that she walks in like she's surprised that it's Christmas, as if the magic is so overwhelming when obviously she is the person who is making this all happen. But like, it doesn't matter. The magic of Christmas is so strong for Corky.
Yes.
And her pride in her little elves, that she calls all of them, lasts about 20 seconds before she then starts barking edits and orders around the space about how they're doing everything wrong. And finally lands on poor Fran. Corky has the same approach to trees and their ornamentation that I do with pie and whipped cream. I don't want to see the pie. I want to be surprised that the pie is underneath once I start eating it. And I feel like that's her. She wants to be surprised there's a tree there because the ornaments are everywhere.
I'm feeling bad for Fran, the actress. Did she ever get a
Poor
line?
Fran. I don't know.
At least Mar has like moments. Like she
gets a little like sputtering here.
She does a lot of stuff. Like there's the
Fran's
episode
working.
where she throws out she tries to take the menu out of the garbage. Like she gets business. Fran is a heavyweight. Fran is one of our like go-to extras, and I love Fran.
Good for her. Good for who plays Fran.
That's the thing, because extras don't get credited.
Justice for Fran. Corky, in her very delicate manner, which I have to say, and because it happens a lot in this episode, my favorite Corky is aggressive Corky.
Same.
Because it's antithesis. You know, she's so delicate and sweet, and then she just snaps. She makes everyone in the room take a big breath to smell the scent of pine. I will say I am that person. For me, the winter is some of my favorite time of the year, and I just want to be in an evergreen forest. So for me, if I was going to have a holiday aesthetic, it would definitely be the kind of winter wonderland, woodsy cabin somewhere vibe. So I want to smell like I'm in a forest, a Sherwood forest, if you will.
Oh, Jesse, I just remembered something.
What?
The last Christmas episode, we talked about how I had never had eggnog, and I still haven't had eggnog, and I feel like I should have it for you.
I do want you to try it. I just want to be the one who makes you try it so I can confirm that if it's going to work, it's going to be this one.
We'll
like
wait.
I want to be there. I want to test it. I want to sprinkle it with nutmeg.
Ooh.
And then I also want to give you the option to try it as the creamer in your coffee, because that's what I do. You know, this is our devotion to each other.
There are a lot more Christmas episodes of Murphy than I realize now that I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as she makes everyone take in their big breath, she breathes out and says, it puts her right into the holiday spirit, and starts very enthusiastically singing, dashing through the snow, forcing everyone to join. And one of my favorite bits of action is as she's singing and moving around the room singing, Murphy arrives in a cap and glasses, and she doesn't even miss a beat. She's like, Murphy's here, dashing through, like just keeps going. And what I love that everyone does in the room, everyone else stops singing along. The moment that Murphy enters, she's not clocking that. All she's clocking is that she can't hear Murphy. And so she is all up in the business. And in her final line that she is allowed at a sleighing song tonight, the giant long O, she sings directly into Murphy's ear, so that Murphy decides to match with volume a knock it off right back in her face.
She is all of us. Being cranky when, women aren't supposed to be, like the least of a foul mood and not smile. And just like her crankiness just makes me so happy.
It makes me so happy. And also like, you could be someone who loves Christmas, who goes and carols. You could be that person. If someone, when you are tired, is loudly singing, dashing through the snow in your face, we are all Murphy.
She's been on a plane around Christmas time in an interview that she didn't like, and she doesn't want it. It didn't matter who it was. Not going to have it. Yeah.
She asked Corky to give it a rest. She just spent 3 days in Beijing listening to Deng Xiaoping tell her he's not too old to run China. Quote, to prove it, we spent the entire interview on a bicycle built for two. He made me sit up front, and then the weasel didn't pedal once.
A lot of times when, we take different sections of this, I'll write ideas, but this scene, I've just written down funny lines. Like the whole list, my whole list is just funny lines. Like over the handlebar of a Schwinn, which is like the rhythm in that is just so, oh, March, oh boy, cheddar month. Like
Miles arrives with a mission and says one of my favorite lines, which is, "Murphy, my little jasmine bud," and asks her if she arrived with lots of exciting news from the mysterious East. Murphy clearly is not here for Miles's energy, says she is going to return a few phone calls, go to bed. He says absolutely she can as soon as they have their story meeting. Ignores him, walks into her office, and then we get one of my favorite Milesisms, which is Miles trying to be the parent in the scenario. Says, "Murphy, get back here. Story meeting, Murphy. I believe I'm talking to you, miss."
Yeah, he's getting a lot more strong-willed around Murphy this season, which I love. Not that he hasn't always, but like it's just a little bit more sort of exactly parenty. It doesn't have
he's
that
getting
hint
fed
of like
up.
fear in it. It's uncomfortability probably, the power that he has. He's all nicknamey, which is how we know Miles. Like I'm surprised that it's taken this long, but now he's coming in with nicknames like up the wazoo.
Jim arrives at the coffee station. Jim is always on time, focused and ready to go. Jim looks up from the pad of paper he's writing on and thoughtfully asks, if someone was getting Miles a fruit basket, would he want tropical fruits like guavas and kiwis or cheeses of the world? I love the idea of someone of Jim's ilk, of his gender and generation, of like, what would this man choose for gifts for people? And it would be the same thing every time. It's like something sensible that Doris probably suggested once 15 years ago.
He doesn't have to go shopping. He's a busy guy.
He's just checking off the options.
Well, here's the thing I just thought of. I was going to say that Jim feels like someone of a generation whose secretary would do the shopping for him. But Jim is the kind of person I think who does want to get something personal.
Yes.
But just doesn't have the time to do that. So this is his way of being personal.
At that moment, Frank arrives, and before Miles can really get his claws into him to get him to sit down for the story meeting, Jim corners him, asks him, would he want the fruit or would he want the cheeses? And Frank says, not this again. Fruit, cheeses. Jim, let me clue you in. I don't know anybody who looks at their calendar and says, it's March. Oh boy, cheddar month. Honestly, I do know several people who I think would have that reaction. So,
I mean, a gift every month? Yes.
I would love a gift basket from Jim. I would need the tropical fruits because of my cheese problem. But like, I would love a gift basket from Jim. I would love anything from Jim. This is where we get a shot of the secretary for the episode, which is a big plastic lawn decor snowman at this moment with a single sign, a big red one that says, I don't get coffee. This will change as we keep going.
Yes, I tried. When we get to that scene, I tried to write down as many as I could see, but it was hard.
Folks chime in. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
Murphy sits down, says, let's get it over with. He agrees, but he's trying to get some people to stop turning it into Santa's workshop. Corky says, bah humbug, Miles. You know what your problem is? And I wrote, that he's Jewish? And she says, you just don't understand the spirit of giving.
Ugh.
And he says, oh, really? Tonight is the first night of Hanukkah, with 7 more nights after that. I had to get gifts for 14 relatives. You think I don't know about the spirit of giving? Call up a MasterCard, they'll tell you. Which, as you have illustrated, is not necessarily... But as far as the pop culture joke about it.
Yeah, and everyone has different traditions. And also I think that like that is sort of a joke. It's like I have to get more than one thing. And listen, some people do it, but like most people, everyone has a different tradition because it's kind of a made up tradition. It's not based on anything. But I think
I just like that we actually call out the Jewish character who's stuck in Christmas this entire episode.
Which, if we can say, the writers of this episode, much like most of the Christmas music, are Jewish.
Yep. Frank starts bemoaning he hates the whole season. He spends hours every year agonizing over what to get people. I so believe this.
Well, of course. It has to be perfect.
Of course he does.
No, which is what cracks me up, that he talks about the horrible gift that he got one of his dates.
Yeah. So he says he always finally ends up in the drugstore buying what's ever left. And he says, and believe me, if you're giving someone a hemorrhoid pillow for Christmas, you better write a really funny card or chances are she's not going to go out with you again.
Yeah. Frank. You just needed to take her out to a really fancy dinner. Yeah. Like, I don't, you got Murphy earrings. Maybe you do the jewelry. I worry for Frank. I worry for Frank.
I do think it's funny that he buys a stereotypically romantic gift for his platonic friend.
We're going to talk about that.
And not for his romantic interests.
Yeah.
Murphy thinks this whole gift giving thing is getting out of hand. She just came from a country where people have so little and they have so much. Maybe this Christmas they could do something more useful. And she says, I mean, do any of us need another cheese basket? And Jim just kind of pouts to the side and goes, fine, you're getting the exotic fruits.
This is such a great episode for everybody. Everybody has the really wonderful comedic moments. But Jim, oh God.
So Murphy suggests that they all give the money they would have spent on gifts to charity, which Great. Miles says, you know what? This is a great idea. They do a good deed, and they cut down on anxiety and inefficiency in the office too. Jim says, it does seem closer to the true meaning of Christmas. Murphy says it will only work if they make a pact. And she stands up and says, all right, everybody, assume pact positions.
I love that. Pact positions.
They all swear by putting their hands in the center and agree that they will give the money they would have spent on gifts to charity.
Cut to, we're back in the bullpen. Murphy is dressed in this fabulous sort of gray suit with like rose gold necklace. Like, really lovely. And she's sneaking Lynn out of the office. Lynn gets a line. I don't know why it's not Fran, but Lynn gets a line.
Justice for Fran.
So Lynn, new office person, coming out of the office with a gift. Murphy saying that, it's really, really sort of secret. And then she calls Marv into her office. And that's when we see that the big blow up snowman has more signs. Now, I think they're all don't signs, right? Because this is what I got. Tell me if you had any of these.
I don't blank.
I don't type. I don't work overtime, I saw. I don't have time. I don't do phones. It just feels like sort of the dartboard.
Yeah.
But it's on this sort of secretary. So the dartboard says no free gift wrap. And pretty much, Murphy has a gift for Marv. We find out it's Christmas Eve. I love that Frank then comes, he knocks and then just goes in. Like, they're such good friends that like the knock really, there was no reason for the knock. It was just,
I'm coming.
Marv has the gift in his hand, and the looks on their faces is just so like, oh no, we have been caught in the worst possible thing that we could possibly ever be caught in. And I love them both in this entire scene, I have to say.
I wrote, we will never get enough Marv.
Never get enough Marv.
In particular, his little thanks Murphy as he darts out of the room after this.
I also
thanks,
love
Murphy. Oh, I love him.
When Frank steals the gift to because he's very suspicious and he does not believe.
Mm-hmm.
He throws the gift back to Marv, who catches it, and Marv is just like, I'm out.
Like,
I'm not staying for
just
this.
Leaves.
I didn't do this. Murphy really shouldn't have written her name on the gift. She's giving it to them, but habit.
Mm-hmm.
That it says it's from Murphy. The jig is up. Frank literally corners Murphy in her chair.
Yeah.
He is so upset because not only did they promise, it was her idea.
That's the thing.
Frank is just like livid that everyone's going to think that he's cheap and he's got to buy Christmas gifts on Christmas Eve for 30 people. But he, of course, has a gift for Murphy, which really shocks Murphy.
I do love the line that clearly is in his head of like, okay, the coworkers aren't buying gifts for each other.
Yeah, but not friends.
But they're not coworkers. Like, they have their own friend gift that's different than the coworker gift.
And I kind of feel like I might have done what Frank's doing. Like, I think I would have assumed that we were exchanging gifts. Now, giving it to her at work was probably not a good idea. But I think that I probably would have thought this too. Like, no, we're besties. Yep. Of course we're going to buy each other.
Of course. He buys her a birthday present. Yes. Like, it's very specific.
So Murphy really needs Frank to get out. She makes some excuse about going to the post office. And she is so just like antsy and freaking out and grabbing her stuff. And then when Frank is out, she opens the gift, really just like rips it apart. And she freaks out because she goes, oh, great, they're gorgeous. As if to be like, they had to be really good. Yeah. And this is where I just have to say, buying jewelry for people is so personal. I would never buy jewelry for someone. And like you said, the fact that Frank bought something that really a romantic partner would buy is considered sort of a romantic gift. Now, if anyone has listened to the Murphy Brown episode of Podcast they talk about how they think that Frank is really hot.
Yeah.
Since I did get Frank in the character quiz, if Frank is this good at buying jewelry for someone that he has a personal connection with, I think I can fix Frank. I think
good for you.
I think Frank might be like my soulmate, maybe.
Honestly,
I would fix him. I could totally fix Frank. We should date. We should have been married in the revival and had kids. Like I'm thinking that he is my Berchert, that he is my endgame. I can fix him.
I see this so well. Also, you know why? And I say this with so much love. I think you both have a similar anxiety pattern.
Yes.
That what it makes me think of is something I was just telling you about an office dog that I met at a commercial callback.
Are you saying that I'm an office dog?
No, listen.
Okay.
Listen. Her sweet name was Remy. And we loved her because she was so sweet, the way she just like checked in with everyone. We're like, she's so gentle and calm. We love her so much. And they were like, well, actually, she has a lot of anxiety, but it helps her anxiety to hang out with the people who also have anxiety. They counteract each other. So she sees anxiety, she meets with it, and they both feel better. I feel like the two of your like neuroses that I love so much would just lead to like such a beautiful like blend of understanding. I feel like Frank is your everything.
Yeah, I'm starting to think. I used to think maybe, me and Miles, but like now I'm thinking it's Frank.
I think you would eat Miles alive.
Yeah, you're right, I would. But he seems
You really would.
He seems to like that.
Here's the thing, he would love it. I think you would be the person that he like compares all things against the rest of his life. I also, we have talked about this, the fact that Frank was clearly supposed to be gay.
Yeah.
And the fact that he has such an awareness of his closest female friend and her style and her understanding, the fact that he can buy a gift like that with such thoughtfulness, with such connection to her and her personal style and her preferences, something that would normally be seen as romantic, that is absolutely not. It's just a beautiful gift for his friend that he knows she would love. But cannot for the women he dates. To me, that really aligns with where his actual affections lie, and not like, I think it emphasizes how platonic Murphy is for him and how much he was not meant to understand these women that he was dating.
Because there's no fear in his relationship with Murphy.
No.
So he's open and clear to have like he's his true self with her.
Yeah, that's why that gift is not romantic. If he gave it to the women he was dating, it'd be the most romantic gift in the world. He doesn't know how to give them romantic gifts.
So Murphy grabs her coat and bag and she just like busts out of the office. And she runs into Jim, who has some feedback on her Jim Baker piece that he'd like to share, which is lovely.
Yeah.
But he's worried that something's wrong because Murphy is just like all over the place and giddy and trying to get out. And he is reading in all of her energy as something is wrong. And I love how he kind of leans in and lowers his voice to kind of gossip with Murphy a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
He saw Frank at Lawden Taylor buying some jewelry, and he knows that, Vicky in accounting told him to go to hell last week.
Yeah.
So he's not dating anyone. So he hates to suggest it, but he's afraid that, and I love that he knows this, that he was buying something for you.
Yes!
I can't believe he didn't go, the conclusion is that Frank has a secret girlfriend. No, that it's for Murphy.
No, of course not. Also, I love that we find out that Jim is so aware of and invested in Frank's love life.
Yeah, like you don't think that he would be a gossiper, but the fact that he just he
wants to be. I love this. I love the idea. He wants to be. I mean, he writes the novel he writes. He wants to be a gossiper.
Yes, he really does. Oh, the novel. Can't get way to that. But then this whole scene is great. And I can't, obviously we'll put some clips on the Instagram and you should watch the episode, link on our website. The back and forth of like incriminating and like, I didn't do anything wrong, but why did you say that? And I didn't do anything wrong is so great. Because Murphy is like accusatory, like, what were you doing at Lawden Taylor? And Jim is like, well, I was shopping for Doris. And she doesn't believe him. And Jim is like, well, I don't believe you. And
we don't get enough Murphy and Jim standoffs.
We don't. And
it's actually really great to see them go toe to toe. It's fantastic.
So finally they decide, the elevator opens, Murphy needs to leave, and Jim says that, oh, I'll leave the notes on your desk, to which the elevator closes because Murphy realizes, oh, no. Now, I don't know if it's the wrapping paper or the gifts under her desk that she's worried about, but it is not a good idea for Jim to be in her office.
The shopping bags full of gifts under her desk with no masking.
Yeah.
Girl, you got to shut your door.
Yeah. She left in a hurry. She was freaking out.
Sure did.
So first, Jim finds the wrapping paper, looks at the note. Dear Lord, finds all the presents under the desk, runs out in a state of panic. I would say that he is in a tizzy.
He sure is. If anyone could tizzy.
Runs into Corky, who has no idea what's going on.
Corky is in the greatest dress I have ever seen on a holiday episode. This green dress with buttons up the back and red accents on the collar and cuffs. I need it. Someone tell me how I can make this. Give me a pattern.
But what I love about the end cap of this scene is that as the elevator is sort of closing, Jim asks if she has a pair of isotoners, and as if he's just inquiring. And Corky's like, no, why? And he goes, oh, no reason. Damn. And just like the way his face just sort of like completely like collapses as the elevator is closing. Everyone is so good in this episode, but this scene particularly I love. It feels very Frasier-like because it's such a farce where everyone's like their energy is up and they got to do something really fast and more farcical than Murphy Brown usually does.
Yes. Hijinks ensue.
Now, it was interesting. I think of isotoners as being such an 80s and 90s thing, but it's still around. And they were actually founded in 1924, which I was surprised about. So they've been around for a long time.
Wow. Oh
yeah.
God.
And they were very, very warm gloves.
Yes.
Should mention that. And then we're off to Phil's.
We are off to Phil's. You know what? Phil is a spirited fellow. So he's in his red suspenders and has a Santa hat. We see him crossing to Miles at the hero table, giving him a check for their Christmas charity drive from Phil's. And Miles thanks him, but insists it is not a Christmas charity drive. It is a non-secretarian, non-denominational holiday charity drive. Just rolls off the tongue. To which Phil asks, is it tax deductible? Then you can call it whatever you want.
Yes.
Miles calls it genius, Phil. He recognized a great idea and he ran with it. Miles is crossing up to talk to Phil at the bar like old buddies. He said everyone on the show has contributed, and for the last 2 weeks, everyone in the office has been stress-free and full of holiday cheer. Timing 4, aggressive Corky has burst through the door and says, get off your butt, Miles, we've got a big problem. And then I wrote, my favorite Corky is aggressive Corky.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I love her all black, like long coat, and she looks so good. I also like we're seeing Corky's fashion mature this season.
Oh, yeah, good point. Yeah.
So she looks very, very chic.
Very chic.
In a way that we hadn't seen before. So Corky just found out Murphy, Frank, and Jim are all out buying presents for the whole office. Miles says, they wouldn't do that. We made a deal. Deal schmeal, they're cheating and it's not fair. Everyone's going to think that Corky doesn't care. And she says, well, I'm not going to let that happen, Miles. When the chips are down, I can shop as fast as anyone. Do we think Corky is a good shopper?
Yes.
For presents?
Yes. Oh, wait.
I think she's a good shopper. I don't think she's a good gift giver.
Here's the thing. I think that for her entire family and friends from her hometown, they would say that she is an excellent gift giver.
Yes.
I think that the disconnect is that she doesn't quite understand what her friends who are A, older than her, B, come from a completely different background.
Exactly.
And she's still having a hard time understanding what that's like. And so,
back home, the people she's buying for would want the thing that she thinks they would want.
Absolutely.
Because they share the same perspective and the same desires and taste. Here, Corky would buy everyone what she thinks they need or would want.
Yes.
She is not in tune with those things. And I do think, unlike some other people that we will talk about in a second, they're not going to all get the same present. She's not going to get 30 of the same present. She's going to get a different present for everyone.
Frank panicked.
Frank, you know what? It's not a hemorrhoid pillow. So Corky is on her way out the door. Miles catches her in the doorway and says, Corky, don't do it. We made a pact and we can't go back on it. Someone has to show a little integrity. And she says one of my favorite Corky lines of this episode, which is, oh, that's great, Miles. Just what Earl in the mailroom wants for Christmas. A big box of integrity. The man has got a gun rack in his truck. A big box of integrity. So good.
It really does in both scenarios, even the real one. It does sort of surprise me that it wasn't like, so the stars of the show will not buy gifts for each other, but we'll buy it for the crew.
Yeah.
Who's not making the same money per episode as we are.
Yes. I'm like, which I am absolutely Murphy in this scenario where I'm like, don't buy me a present. Let's not buy presents for each other, but let's get one for the crew. Like, I would absolutely be like, yeah, I understand where the confusion starts in this episode, which is Murphy was like, oh, we're not buying presents for each other, but we're going to buy it for everybody else who like works for us and makes less.
Yeah, but Murphy.
Then it keeps getting conflated.
But Murphy and Candace knew what they were doing was wrong. They were hiding it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But they were right.
They were right.
So she takes off and Miles calls after her, go ahead, join the masses. Miles Silverberg does not cave in. Miles opines that this is what's wrong with the world. When people think the rules don't apply to them, there's nothing but chaos. Even if he's the only one participating, he'll be making a statement. People will say he didn't give in. Miles Silverberg, the boss, the Jewish boss. The only one who didn't buy Christmas presents for the office. Oh, God.
Sorry, I love it so much.
It's, oh my gosh, his descent and his face crumpling as he's realizing. He cries, oh God, and sprints to his coat to sprint out of Phil's. But meets Frank at the door because we have a revolving door of Phil's at the moment. And they have this little, it's almost like a mafia standoff.
It is.
These two. The way they kind of circle each other and, oh, hi. And then Miles goes, what do you got there, Frank? Groceries? Oh, they are for my family. Good, Frank. First you cheat, and then you lie. Nice way to celebrate the birth of your lord. So good. The lines in this episode. Oh my, that one had me cackling. I had to pause and go back to watch it again. But truly, this episode has so many good lines that I just had to stop and laugh at and write down. They're so good. So Frank slams the door shut. Phil, give me a beer. And Frank says it wasn't his fault. He bought one lousy present for Murphy. She bought for the entire office staff. He says he hates this holiday. He's having such anxiety. He bought the same thing for everybody, but he's not sure if it's the right thing for everybody. Phil gives him the opportunity to share what it is, and it's 30 pre-wrapped coffee mugs showing the Peanuts characters in the nativity scene.
I love the pre-wrapped. That sentence is just, yeah.
And Phil says, it's the thought that counts, Frank. Although you might consider getting a Hanukkah present for Miles, he's pretty sensitive about this Christmas thing, especially since he found out everybody's buying presents for each other. To which Frank is gobsmacked and says, not buying it. They had an agreement. And Phil says, what you have now is 20 minutes before the drugstore on the corner closes. Frank cries, this is unbelievable. The drugstore, again, every year it's the same damn thing. There's no escaping destiny, Phil. Don't even try. And he starts his way to the revolving door, which then opens to show Murphy with a giant present in her hand, saying, Frank, your gift just came. And he just storms out right past her. He doesn't have time for this. She turns to Phil, gobsmacked, asks, what's the matter? Because as far as she's concerned, she has fixed the problem. She has no idea what she created. Mm-hmm. Phil says, oh, Frank just found out that he has to buy the gang presents. And she says, what? We said we wouldn't. We made a promise. And then Phil says,
someone in Washington broke a promise. I'm stunned. Can I also just say, since Frank has left, the way that Joe uses those bags through the rest of the episode as part of like this like physical thing that he's doing, like funny.
It's a manifestation of his stress.
It really is. And it's but it's funny and it's realistic and it feels almost like dance moves. Like he's doing physical comedy without like over like doing it. But also something I noticed that I didn't remember from when I was a kid, those are reusable bags.
Yeah.
I love how they still sort of keep a lot of that stuff in the show that has already been established beforehand. Mm-hmm. It's really great.
Core values. Murphy is gobsmacked is the word of the episode. And she asks, where is she going to get presents for them now? She's had it with this holiday. Why couldn't the three wise men have taken the family out for dinner? And
also
storms out of Phil's.
Great line, and it's a great button. So we're at the pharmacy. We will return to this location in season 4 for one of my favorite scenes. But right now we get to see one of my favorite people. Recurring goddess, Jenifer Lewis of the St. Louis Lewises. That's a quote from Jenifer herself. In one of her earlier roles, although Jesse's going to talk about her whole career, so you may have seen her in something before 1990, playing the woman who works at the pharmacy, who is really much fed up. She doesn't have time to help you with your gifts. Corky bursts in wanting to buy 8 to 10 gifts. They are closing in 10 minutes. That's a gift a minute. Also, can I just say that I became nostalgic for the gum rack?
Yes. There were several things in there where I went, oh, yeah.
It was just very specific to like my childhood.
Yes.
The wrapping, the different brands. And I've never had that feeling before. And I was like, oh God, this is what it must have been like when like my parents watched stuff from the 50s.
Miss Jenifer Lewis of the St. Louis Lewises, playing the drugstore clerk who is working on Christmas Eve and waiting for her shift to be over, is a goddess, is an icon, still slaying up the game to this day. We don't have time for her entire career because it is enormous. Jenifer Jeanette Lewis, born January 25th, 1957, is a multi-hyphenate singer, actor, performer. I think I first ever knew her as one of Dolores's friends backup singers in the club in Sister Act. Between that and her as the mother in The Preacher's Wife, one of my favorite remakes of a classic for the holiday season, she is incredible. I love her so much. It's one of my favorite holiday movies. But now that I am older, I now know her from many of the other things she did. So she was born, shockingly, you may be shocked, a suburb of St. Louis, hence the title, and grew up performing in theater, as a singer, in church. In the 1970s, she moved to New York City, and she debuted on Broadway in a small role in Eubie. And it's a musical based on the work of Eubie Blake. And we've talked a little bit about Eubie Blake. In particular, James Hubert Eubie Blake was an American pianist and composer of ragtime, jazz, other popular music. Most notably, he and his longtime collaborator wrote Shuffle Along, one of the first Broadway musicals written and directed by African Americans. Please go look it up. The history of that show is so much bigger than you realize. The way it affected the actual map and layout of Manhattan's theater district is incredible. Eubie's a really big deal. So the fact that she was in that show is really special. She landed the role of Effie White in The Workshop of Dreamgirls.
Oh, that I didn't know. Oh my God.
And when it moved to Broadway, they replaced her with Jennifer Holliday, famously the original Effie. My favorite big break of hers, obviously she has a couple of them, but which I think is a shared favorite for the two of us, is that she accepted a position as a harlot, which were the famous backup singers for Bette Midler and her live shows.
Oh.
I love the Harlettes. I wanted to be a harlot when I was little. Their full name is the Staggering Harlettes. It's a trio, always a trio of backup singers. They supported Bette Midler during her live performances. They've had many people who were harlots. I would say Jenifer Lewis is probably the most notable of the harlots in her own career after. This is just the epitome of Bette Midler's live shows are the harlots. And it's one of my other favorite harlots, just to throw out, is Katie Sagal. That led to her being in one of the singers in the Otto Titzling number in Beaches in 1988.
Yeah, for those who may not realize who she is, she's the one with the big tits who falls into the pit.
Go, Jenifer. It's the most Jenifer Lewis thing. Her career in the 1990s, much like Murphy Brown, did a lot of guest appearances on sitcoms because she was one of those people, I think very akin to Christine Ebersole we were talking about, somebody who had a theatricality about them that could bring that to the container of television. She played really unique, interesting, bombastic characters. She also has some of the most incredible eye contact on film I've ever seen. Throughout the 90s, she was, as I said, Sister Act, What's Love Got to Do With It, starring Angela Bassett. She received her first of more than one NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Motion Picture nomination for that movie. She did a lot of comedy, especially at this time. She was in Renaissance Man. She was in Karina, starring Whoopi Goldberg, that I remember going to in the theaters. She was in Panther. She was in Dead Presidents. She obviously was Whitney Houston's mother in The Preacher's Wife. If you have not watched that movie, please go. They're incredible. She was in Blast from the Past. She was in Mystery Men. She was in the Temptations miniseries. She was in everything in the 90s. In the 2000s, she continues to be in everything. She also shows up as Tony's mother in Girlfriends, which was a really important show for Black representation as a Black-led ensemble cast. It was on UPN and then their successor when they became the CW. It ran from 2000 to 2008. A lot of people who are now notable Black actresses got their start on that show because it created so many opportunities for them to be more than just the cliches they were used to playing. Moving ahead, in the 2000s, she also did a lot of voice work. One of my favorites being the Walt Disney movie, The Princess and the Frog, which has some of my favorite voice actors. In the 2010s, she proceeds to jump ahead to do stage productions again. She also starts working with drag queen Shangela on a online reality show called Jenifer Lewis and Shangela. If you want to see hilarious dynamics, just watch those two play off each other. She's hilarious. She proceeded to do a lot more television work again in the 2010s. And most notably, in 2014, she was cast as Ruby Johnson, Anthony Anderson's character's mother, in the ABC comedy series Blackish. I remember one of my favorite 2010 appearances of Jenifer Lewis in my life was that she wrote a book about her life and career entitled The Mother of Black Hollywood. And she shares her life experiences. The stories are incredible. The audiobook that she does is so good. It is so moving. It is so funny.
She's
Many people on the
hilarious. And her
She's
voice
so
is
funny.
her singing voice is insane.
On the personal side, in 1990, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And for a long time, she hid her diagnosis because there's a lot of shame embedded in the perception of bipolar disorder, also known as manic depression, depending on when in history and psychological description you're in. Eventually, after 17 years of therapy, 10 years of medication, she decided to finally publicly share her diagnosis. And in a 2014 interview, she said, "You have to look in the mirror and say, before you can go or grow into anything, you have to say you love yourself." She's a legend. We can't spend the entire episode talking about Jenifer Lewis, but I could. She has 141 credits currently on IMDb. She has 3 upcoming, including Sister Act 3, which is in pre-production. She's just one of those people, you know her. You know her, You've seen her, you love her. Every time she shows up, you're like, oh, Jenifer Lewis.
Can I add just a little bit of what I love, about Jenifer Lewis, which I've already said, which does go back to, for me, being a huge Bette Midler fan, as we both are, of being a harlot. But she's best friends with Mark Shaman, and their collaboration is really amazing. Now, Sister Act was originally written for Bette. Bette Midler said no. Mark did do the orchestrations for that. But they worked on something, they've worked on things a lot. But many people may know the mockumentary from 1999. It's a cult classic called Jackie's Back.
It's so good.
To the point of which there's a Jackie Washington Day that she celebrates every year. Mark did all the music. Tim Curry is in it as this sort of British documentarian doing this, washed up diva character named Jackie Washington, played by Jenifer Lewis. It's directed by Robert Townsend. It is hilarious. I highly recommend that you check it out. But also, Mark has written other songs for Jenifer, including one of my favorite things that Jenifer does, which she's done at 54 Below and the Rosie O'Donnell Show in her concerts, is a song called Black Don't Crack.
Yep.
I will put a link to it. There's been evolving lyrics. It's fantastic. And their partnership as friends and as collaborators is really sort of amazing. I would like to sit at the feet of Jenifer Lewis. Spelled with one N. Do not spell it wrong.
Do not spell it wrong. I just can't wait to see what else she does, because she's nowhere near over. She's nowhere near done. I love her so much.
Yeah. And on Jackie Washington Day, which is July 15th, 2022, she got a star on the Walk of Fame.
Yeah, she did.
And here she is on Murphy Brown. So, woman who works at the store, Goddess Jenifer Lewis, tells Corky that at 6 o'clock she will be in the parking lot. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So they better get,
hourly life.
So Corky scurries off. Miles comes in and gets a little tiny cart, and he gets the one with a sticky wheel, and he can't really seem to sort of move it. I love the direction in this episode of how they come in on one character and then it makes us see a different character until all of a sudden we realize that everybody is in the store.
Also, the comedy of a tiny shopping cart with a stuck wheel will never not be funny. It's
great.
So good.
So they all find each other. What I love also is that eventually that Frank kind of runs in, sort of hunched over again, like he's using these bags in his body, sees them, and then tries to sort of run out with the same sort of running pattern, and they catch him at the door.
Buddy.
And then at one point, as they're all sort of arguing about why they're there, Jenifer Lewis just sort of walks by in the background and lets them know that there's 10 minutes to blast off. You have time to buy a card. That's it. And Corky yells at them, you're buying Christmas presents for me of all the low down, inconsiderate things. And I think at one point, even Miles is like, fine, don't buy the Jewish guy a Christmas present. See if I care. And as they're all sort of screaming at each other, Murphy sneaks in, sort of, around them in this beautiful slate blue pashmina over her head, sunglasses, like a cat burglar who smells like Chanel.
Draws the most attention.
But almost gets away with it. Also mention, I love the fact that when Jenifer Lewis comes through, she's wearing her coat.
Oh yeah, she is done. She's an hourly worker.
She's
done. Clocking out.
So Murphy is grabbing a little gnome family that's sort of set up. I find it so funny that this whole scene is them being mad at each other and still trying to hide it, even though at one point when they hand out the gifts to each other, they're going to figure it out.
Yep.
Now, we all love Saucy Jim.
Yes.
And Jim is to the point so upset that he says that they should go to Tiffany's and buy Her Majesty a lovely crown.
He's so peeved.
He's so upset. And Miles gets so upset that he sort of grabs this whole like wooden station of gnomes, which of course makes them all fall off and completely break on the ground. And then all he has is like little tiny like gnome parts. He's trying to pretend that they're fine. They're supposed to be like this.
The way he says, see, they're modular.
They're modular.
It just broke me. It's so good.
And like a teenager who knocked over a whole display and purposely broke things, another woman who works there, who's not Goddess Jenifer Lewis, but you know, it's fine,
No.
decides to take Miles to the manager because he's in trouble.
I mean, the way this woman says it, that she might as well be holding his ear and walking him to the principal's, incredible read.
And then we're back in the bullpen.
The transition to Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, it in context sounds so mournful because it's a beautiful, slow rendition, but it just sounds mournful as we fade into the bullpen and we see a group of 4 staffers all looking at their Peanuts mugs with various stages of disappointment and awkwardness. And you just see Frank standing behind them, clutching his gift bags to his person and just looking ashamed. He is shamefaced. Yet again has failed at gift giving. And Frank just goes, I knew they'd hate the mugs. Miles tells him to quit whining. At least he got them something. And he says, of course, I could always hand out these gnome parts now that he's the proud owner of the entire colony. And Murphy checks her watch and says, 7 o'clock, party's over. She's going to go home and hang herself on the Christmas tree. Eldon arrives. Eldon is in actual clothing, which we like to see every once in a while out and about. He's got a red shirt on underneath. His hair is out and proud. We love it. The mullet is strong.
That leather jacket, which we know
the
actually
leather
belongs
jacket
to Bobby.
He arrives and she's surprised to see him. And he says he won't be at her home later, so he wanted to stop by and give her something to celebrate the joyous season, and hands her an envelope. Murphy reacts as we probably expect she will. And she says, not another present. She can't deal with it. Take it back. She doesn't want it. And Bobby does the best, just kind of like freeze and just goes, you know, it's always such a treat to do something nice for you. He tells her to just take it so he can get out of there. She grabs it and he like pokes at her, just goes, thank you. Happy holidays. And she takes out what's inside and it says that it's a donation has been made in her name to the Campbell Home for Children. And she looks at him and he says, yeah, well, you know, people get all nuts buying people presents and he thinks it takes away from the true meaning of Christmas. Of course, not everyone agrees. So if she's disappointed that it's not a cheese basket or something, she stops him and says, no, it's a pretty terrific gift. And they all just kind of stand there very quietly, thoughtful and a little shamed. And Eldon just looks around and goes, well, he'd like to stick around, but the party's getting a little too wild for him. Hey, people, calm down. Someone's going to get hurt here. Murphy tells him to stay and have some punch. He says he can't. He's got to get to the home, the Campbell home he has just referenced. He's going to help cook Christmas Eve dinner for the little ones. I don't think any of us are surprised that Eldon does this.
No, not at all.
You know, like it's, again, we have established this character. I'm like, of course he does. Murphy is surprised, though, and says he's never told her about this. And he goes, it's just something he does. It makes him feel good. And, quote, it's more enjoyable than sitting in your living room watching you throw water balloons at Christmas carolers. He takes that as his leave and he walks out and he wishes a joyous Noel to the bullpen, steps in the elevator and heads out. It's very sweet. This is one of my favorite Eldon moments. He's so confident and lovely and I just love him so much. And the gang sits there just kind of staring. And Murphy asks what happened to them. How did they get so far away from what they set out to do? She says she doesn't want to be mad at them. And Corky says she doesn't either. She's never been mad on any major holiday. Which seems very important to Corky.
Yeah. Like, don't go to sleep angry.
Don't go to sleep mad.
Don't get mad on holidays.
It's not the time. And Jim points out that, you know, they actually did raise quite a bit of money for charity, so they should feel good. Mm-hmm. Frank says, you got that right. And they should do the same thing next year. And that time, really stick to their promise. Miles says that's good because he's been banned from that drugstore for life.
Which apparently gets lifted because we do see him there again.
Mm-hmm. Murphy says she'll see them next week. Happy holidays. She really means it. And she starts toward the elevator, but pauses. She comes back and grabs the envelope from Eldon that she left on the table and says she thinks she'll check the address of the Campbell home, see if they need any extra hands.
Oh.
Frank says, gee, Murph, you in a kitchen with kids nearby? Sounds kind of dangerous. Maybe he should come along. And Miles thoughtfully says, that place is right on his way home, more or less. Maybe he'll stop by as well. Jim says, well, Doris doesn't expect him home for a while, so he decides to join. Corky says, I'm coming too. And she says, she knows something really fun they can all do on the way over. We can sing the 12 Days of Christmas. I know all the words. Most people get stuck on 10 Lords of Leaping. And Jim interrupts her and says, Corky, I don't mean to correct you, but it's 9 Lords of Leaping. And then Murphy interrupts and says, no, it's 9 swans of swimming, 8 ladies dancing, 7 lords. I literally can't say this wrong. It's so hard to say it wrong. I feel like the Muppets saved a generation from the confusion of this song. So any of us who grew up with the Muppets singing 12 Days of Christmas with John Denver, we all know how the song works because it became, but that was after their childhood. So of course these guys are all wrong. And then Frank chimes in with, it's 6 Lords of Leaping. And then they all start kind of arguing with each other. Jim says he's been singing that song for 40 years. He's pretty sure he knows the words, and they argue their way into the elevator, which is what made me do a sidebar on the 12 Days of Christmas. I was like,
let's do it.
Jim, you're older than 40. Why have you only been singing it for 40 years? That song's been around for a while. So
that would make
12
him
days of
10?
Yeah? Actually, no. Yeah. 10 years old. That works. So the 12 Days of Christmas is an English Christmas carol. It has been adapted into many languages by now. It was originally published around 1780. A number of different melodies have been attributed to it. The most well-known is derived from a 1909 arrangement of a traditional folk melody that was done by English composer Frederick Austin. One of the reasons why I say it's hard for me to say these wrong is because I am so used to the Muppets singing it that I have very specific voices on very specific lines of this song. So I always know that it's 7 swans a swimming because the one character with a lateral lisp is the one who says it. And whenever you sing it with a family, normally everyone's doing their favorite Muppet version. But just to clarify, the list is 12 drummers drumming, 11 pipers piping, 10 lords a leaping, 9 ladies dancing, 8 maids a milking, 7 swans a swimming, 6 geese a laying, 5 golden rings or gold rings, depending on the version, 4 calling birds, 3 French hens, 2 turtle doves, and a partridge in a pear tree. So in a rarity of Murphy Brown, Corky was right.
All right, Corky.
And I honestly, if I think anyone is that intense about Christmas, she would be the one who would know the correct lyrics.
Yeah, no, she's the one that I would trust.
And then they're in the elevator and we end on probably my favorite joke of the episode, which is Corky says, just sing the song. And she leans in and we notice at this point, we see 4 of the gang. Miles is currently not visible behind their bodies. As they huddle around, they hum the starting pitch. They take a big breath, and before they can start singing, we just hear Miles' voice sing, dreidel, 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 I made it out of clay. They all part to see him just singing the dreidel song at them as the doors shut. And my favorite little moment is that the doors are shutting. You see Grant make eye contact with Joe, and you see his mask slip a little bit, and he starts, there's just a moment, and you see his, you can see him, fighting the urge to smile out of character. They must have made a face at him or something.
Now, here's an interesting piece of trivia about I Have a Little Dreidel. The music and lyrics are by someone named Samuel, but they're 2 different people. Music by Samuel E. Goldfarb and lyrics by Samuel S. Grossman.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah. Now, I would say it's not a great song, and we kind of feel like we got, screwed on the songs.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
But it's for little kids. I think it's really for little kids. It's just that there are such few Hanukkah songs. That is the one that we always had to sing in choir and things like that. But nowadays we have the Adam Sandler song.
Yes.
But I would also say, as much as I love the Adam Sandler song, do not get me wrong, Daveed Diggs
Yes.
It's a song called A Puppy for Hanukkah.
Yeah.
That I think is so cute.
It's a great song. When that came out, I was like, yes.
It's a bop. It's a bop. So, yeah, that closes another book on a Murphy Brown Christmas episode.
Yeah. It was a good one. This is my favorite one so far.
Remember when Nick at Night would just be like, we're going to show all of the Christmas episodes.
Mm-hmm.
This is the kind of one that you could watch and you would not be lost. It's a great
absolutely.
sort of encapsulation to get someone, I think, into Murphy Brown by being like, hey, let's watch a couple of Christmas episodes from sitcoms.
Truly solid jokes, like non-holiday solid jokes. Like, there were just, every scene had a favorite joke of the episode for me. I do understand why it won.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Like, please remember, as an adult, I enjoy this episode.
You're like, oh.
Definitely, absolutely deserve the Emmy. And I'm very happy about that. And I'm glad that I know the real title. Darn you, Star Ledger. And what's, I think, important, too, is that sort of the underlining spine, in a way, not of the structure, but like of the episode in general, is this idea of consumerism, is the idea of, maybe it's better to give than receive. And if you have, maybe it's better to give to the people who don't have, which is what ends up happening. They're even though their goal was to make money for these charities, they did, and then they still end up spending Christmas Eve also paying that forward by helping out at this home. So I think that's a positive message as well.
I agree. Thank you for listening, friends.
If you enjoyed what you heard today, please show us your support by
liking,
subscribing,
and interacting with us on social media.
Our handle everywhere is
@MurphyBrownPod.
You can also email us at
murphybrownpod@gmail.com
or visit our website at
murphybrownpod.com.
Share us with your friends.
Give us a 5-star rating
wherever you listen to podcasts.
You can also support the podcast by checking out our Patreon.
You can donate once
or be a recurring subscriber
and access exclusive deep dives on Murphy Brown and other related topics,
as well as bonus content we had to cut for time.
100% of what you donate goes toward creating this podcast.
So any way you are able to support, we deeply appreciate.
And we'll see you next time
for another edition of FYI,
the Murphy Brown Podcast.